We've uncovered men who drive vans with the door handles removed from the inside, duct tape, plastic wrist restraints, trap doors. It's incredible to me how many men are capable of doing these types of things to these types of women.
Highway 16 is a 450-mile stretch of road that cuts through the dense forests in British Columbia, from Prince George to Prince Rupert. At first glance, it looks like a normal logging route, winding through sparsely populated towns, thick forests, and impoverished Indian reserves. But this long stretch of road has a sinister aspect as well. It's a place where women, most of them indigenous, have been murdered or have vanished over a 4-decade span. So many women have disappeared that the locals call it the Highway of Tears. It all started back in 1969. Gloria Moody was a 26-year-old mother of 2 young children and on a road trip with her family, spending quality time with her brother. On the evening of October 25th, she was confirmed to be in attendance at the Ranch Hotel Bar in Williams Lake, British Columbia, Canada. Her and her brother had been bar hopping that evening, and when her brother left the third establishment they visited, he says he assumed Gloria was right behind him. But on October 26th, a day later, Gloria's body was found 10 kilometers from Williams Lake on a cattle trail by 2 hunters. Her clothes were removed, and it was evident to investigators that she had been sexually assaulted and battered. The injuries she sustained caused her to bleed out. No one was ever arrested, although multiple people were persons of interest. In 1998, a police officer told family members that the 3 main suspects in the case were now all dead, and despite never closing a cold case of homicide, all the leads were gone. Then, almost a year later, in July of 1970, Micheline Paré, age 18, encountered a similar fate. She was last seen on Highway 29. She came from Quebec and was hitchhiking through the area. 2 women picked her up and dropped her off near Tompkins Ranch. Her body was found in August of 1970. She too had been sexually assaulted and beaten to death with a blunt weapon. In October of 1973, Gail Weiss, 19, disappeared while hitchhiking from Clearwater to Kamloops. Her body was found in a ditch on Highway 5 south of Clearwater. Only a month later, Pamela Darlington, 19, also vanished from Kamloops while hitchhiking to a local bar. Her body was found the next day. On December 13, 1974, Monica Ignace, 14, was believed to be on her way home from school in Thornhill, British Columbia. Her body was found 4 months later in a heavily wooded area east of Terrence. She had been strangled. In August of that same year, Colleen Mcmillan, 16, was last seen leaving her home in Loch Lahatch to hitchhike to a nearby friend's house. Her body was found 46 kilometers south of where she was last seen. Monica Jack, who was only 12 years old and the youngest of all the victims of the Highway of Tears, was last seen riding her bicycle in May of 1978. Her mother saw Monica riding her bike home from shopping and offered to drive her the rest of the way, but Monica wanted to finish her ride home on her own. Her bike was later found, but she was nowhere to be seen. For 17 years, her fate was unknown. In 1995, forestry workers found Monica's remains in a ravine off a logging road about 20 kilometers from where Monica's bike was initially found. Dental records and DNA testing confirmed her identity. She too had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. On May 8, 1981, Maureen Mosey, 33 years old, was last seen hitchhiking from Salmon Arms to Kamloops. Her body was found the next day by a woman walking her dog along a road about 16 kilometers east of Kamloops. She had been severely beaten. Witnesses saw her getting into a vehicle with a man in his late 20s or early 30s with black or brown hair and a beard. Shelly Ann Basu was 16 years old when she disappeared from Hinton, Alberta on May 3, 1983. Reports collected by police state she was last seen at about 8:30 p.m. on Highway 16. Several days after her initial disappearance, personal items, including her clothing, as well as blood droplets matching her blood type, were found near the Athabasca River, but her body was never located. On September 25, 1989, the body of Alberta Williams, 24, was found about 37 kilometers east of Prince Rupert, British Columbia, near the Thai overpass. She also had been strangled and sexually assaulted. That same year, Cecilia Ann Nicol, 15, disappeared. In a horrible coincidence for the family, a year before she went missing, her cousin, Delphine Nicol, 15, also mysteriously disappeared. Both remain missing to this day. On June 11, 1994, Romona Wilson was hitchhiking to her friend's home in Smithers, British Columbia. Her remains were found in April of 1995, alongside Highway 16, near the Smithers Airport. That same year, in July, Roxanne Thiara, 15, went missing from Prince George. She had worked as a prostitute and told a friend she was going out with a customer. She walked around the corner of a building and was never heard from again. Her body was found near an elementary school close to Highway 16 West. She had been stabbed to death. In October of 1995, 19-year-old Lana Derrick disappeared. She was never found. She was last seen at a gas station near Terrence. Nicole Hoare was 25 years old at the time of her disappearance on June 21, 2002. Originally from Red Deer, Alberta, Nicole was last seen at a gas station on 5952 Gauthier Road, west of Prince George. She was never found. Tamra Chapman was 22 years old when she disappeared on September 21, 2005, leaving behind a toddler. She was last seen hitchhiking on Highway 16 near an industrial park in Prince Rupert, British Columbia. Aaliyah Sarika Gir was only 14 years old and a student at D.P. Todd Secondary School in Prince George, British Columbia, when she went missing. She was last seen by her family on February 2, 2006. It was reported that she was last seen getting into a black van. Her body was found 8 days later in a ditch alongside Highway 16, east of Prince George. On May 28, 2011, 20-year-old Madison Scott headed to Hogsback Lake near Vanderhoof, British Columbia, with a friend, Jordy Boldu, to attend a party. After the party, Madison had planned to spend the night camping with her friend Jordy, but around midnight, a fight broke out between a few men at the party, and her friend Jordy, who was injured as a result of the fight and already drunk, decided to leave the party with her new boyfriend. Madison decided not to head home. She instead opted to stay in a tent next to her truck for the night. She was last seen by partygoers at about 3 a.m. 2 days later, when Madison still hadn't returned home, her parents went looking for her at the lake. They found her truck with the flattened tent still next to it. A search of the tent revealed nothing, but Madison's purse was found in the truck. There was no sign of her car keys or cell phone. Police say there was no sign of a struggle and that foul play is suspected. Madison disappeared not far from Highway 16. These are some of the many women who have mysteriously gone missing or who have been murdered on this intricate web of the Highway of Tears. And, in most of these cases, very little information about these victims are available online. There are numerous municipalities and 23 First Nations communities that border the Highway of Tears. Many of the people who live in these communities struggle to make ends meet and receive little assistance. Most of them cannot afford a vehicle to get to work or to go to school. For most of the people here, there is no access to public transportation. There are areas that have access to public transportation, but it is usually limited to just a bus that runs on a restricted schedule. So if people living here miss the bus, or if their work schedule doesn't align with the bus schedule, they have to find other ways of getting to work. This is where the hitchhiking comes in. For many people, women especially, their only option is to hitchhike on the Highway of Tears. This makes them an easy target for predators. There are a number of warning signs throughout the highway, and women know how dangerous it is to hitchhike, but they have very little choice in transportation options. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police officially links 18 cases to the Highway of Tears, although the Indigenous community puts that number closer to 50. More than half of the missing or murdered women on this highway are First Nations people, or people Indigenous to Canada. According to Human Rights Watch, an international non-governmental organization that conducts research and advocacy on human rights, British Columbia has the highest rate of unsolved murders of Indigenous women and girls in Canada. However, this problem is not unique to British Columbia. In 2015, an inquiry into the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls claimed that the national number of murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada is likely over 1,200. Indigenous women represent about 4% of Canada's population, but 16% of murdered women are Indigenous. The murders and disappearances along the Highway of Tears follow the same pattern of disproportionate violence against Indigenous women. Despite many disappearances on Highway 16 over the years, it was only when a white woman, Nicole Hoare, aged 25, disappeared in June of 2002 that extensive search parties went out looking for her, and the case was picked up by the media. However, the Indigenous woman who vanished before didn't get nearly as much attention. In many cases, local police falsely labeled many of the victims as prostitutes or drug users. In addition, people connected to the cases have admitted to deleting all emails relating to the Highway of Tears, casting suspicion and doubt among the Native community regarding their chances for justice. In 2005, Royal Canadian Mounted Police set up Project EPANA to investigate the Highway of Tears murders. By 2007, they had identified 9 more cases, doubling the number of missing or dead women from 9 to 18. In 2012, the project did manage to solve the case of 16-year-old Colleen Mcmillan, who disappeared in 1974. DNA evidence was re-examined, and the American serial killer Bobby Jack Fowler was implicated in her death. Although Bobby had an extensive criminal record in the United States, he was unknown to the RCMP. It was found that in 1974, Bobby Jack Fowler worked for a roofing company in Prince George and would often travel Highway 16. After further investigation, the RCMP suspected that he may have also been responsible for the murder of Pamela Darlington and Gail Ways, 2 other murdered women on the official Highway of Tears victim list. However, Fowler had already died in prison in 2006. He was convicted for 2 separate double homicides in Oregon. A few of the other deaths and disappearances were attributed to 2 other suspects. In 2014, Cody Birkhoff was convicted of the murder of Lauren Leslie, who was found killed in 2010 along the Highway of Tears. Police also tied him to 3 additional victims who disappeared in 2009 and 2010, also along the Highway of Tears. He was only 19 or 20 at the time of the crimes. Birkhoff was sentenced to life in prison with no chance for parole for 25 years. That same year, in 2014, another suspect, Gary Taylor Handlin, was charged with the murder of Monica Jack, who disappeared back in 1978, and another 11-year-old girl named Catherine Mary Herbert, who has also been speculated as being a victim of the Highway of Tears murders. Police said that he was previously a suspect, but there was not enough evidence to charge him. Gary had been sentenced to 18 years for a rape conviction in 1979, but his sentence was later reduced, and he got out in just 12 years. He was found guilty by jury and sentenced to life in prison in early 2019. Thus, Monica Jack's murder becomes the first file in Project E-PANA to officially be solved with full court proceedings and sentencing. E-PANA is still investigating the remaining unsolved cases, however, no new cases have been added since 2007. However, the women have continued to disappear on the Highway of Tears as recently as 2018. It is believed that multiple serial killers have stalked Highway 16 over the last 50 years, and it is possible that most of the cases will remain unsolved.